October 30th, 2020, Nassau, Bahamas. The sun was already climbing when the old man stepped out of his car at the golf club. He was 90 years old, frail, weak. His hands trembled as he reached for his clubs in the trunk. The bag felt heavier than it used to. Everything felt heavier now. His friends watched him struggle and wondered if they should say something. Should they tell him to go home, to rest, to save his strength? But they knew better, because Sean Connery didn't rest, not when there was still a game to play. This would be his last round, his last swing, his last walk across the green. And nobody knew it, not his friends, not his wife, Micheline, waiting at home, not even Sean himself. But somewhere deep inside, maybe he felt it. Maybe that's why he'd woken up that morning and insisted on playing. Why he'd ignored the pain in his chest. Why he'd pushed past the exhaustion that had been dragging him down for months. One more time. One more game. Before everything went dark. But what made him choose that day? What made October 30th different from all the others? His friends would ask themselves that question for months after, and the answer, when they finally understood it, would break their hearts. They say golf was Sean Connery's escape, the one place where he wasn't James Bond, wasn't an actor, wasn't a legend, just a man, a club in his hands, a ball at his feet, and 18 holes stretched out before him like a promise, like salvation. Like the only thing in the world that made sense. He'd started playing in 1962, right after Dr. No made him famous. Right when the world started recognizing his face everywhere he went. When restaurants stopped being quiet. When walks became impossible. When privacy became a memory. Golf was the one place people left him alone. The unwritten rule of the course: you don't bother a man mid-swing. And Sean clung to that rule like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Over the decades, golf became more than escape. It became religion. He played in Scotland, in Spain, in California, in the Bahamas. He played with presidents and paupers, with legends and nobodies. And he treated them all the same. Because on the course, titles didn't matter. Money didn't matter. Fame didn't matter. Only the game mattered. Only the swing. Only the score. His second wife, Micheline, understood this. She'd met him at a golf tournament in Morocco in 1970, watched him play, saw how he transformed on that green, how his face softened, how his shoulders dropped, how he smiled without the weight of the world pressing down on him. And she fell in love with that man, the one without the armor, the one who could breathe. But on that morning, October 30th, 2020, something was different. His swing was slower, his steps heavier, his breath shorter. His friends noticed. One of them, a man he'd known for 20 years, leaned over and asked quietly, "Sean, are you sure you want to do this? We can come back another day." Sean looked at him, that famous piercing stare, the one that made you feel small and understood all at once. And he said, "There might not be another day." The words hung in the air. Nobody responded. What do you say to that? What do you say to a man who knows he's running out of time? So they played. They walked the course in silence, the only sound the thwack of club against ball and the rustle of wind through palm trees. But what his friends didn't know was that Sean had been preparing for this moment for months. Ever since the dementia started taking pieces of him, ever since his body began shutting down, bit by bit, cell by cell. He'd been coming to this course almost every day, as if each round might be his last, as if he could cheat death by just playing, by staying in motion, by refusing to sit still long enough for the end to catch up. Because that's what golf had always been. For Sean Connery, not a hobby, not a pastime. It was his rebellion, his middle finger to fate, a way of saying, I'm still here, I'm still fighting, I'm still alive. He'd discovered golf in the 60s, right when James Bond was turning him into a global icon, right when the world wanted to own him, control him, define him. Golf was the one thing they couldn't touch. On the course, nobody cared if he was 007. Nobody asked for autographs. Nobody wanted anything from him except a good game. And that was all he'd ever wanted. To be left alone. To be free. But freedom, he'd learned, always comes with a price. And his was loneliness. Because the more he pushed the world away, the more he isolated himself on that green, the more alone he became. Even surrounded by friends, he was alone. Even with his wife at home, he was alone. Golf had saved him, but it had also trapped him. Now, on his last day, walking across the 18th hole, Sean Connery felt the weight of it. All those years, all those rounds, all those hours spent trying to outrun the noise in his head, the guilt, the regret, the ghosts of the man he'd been before fame swallowed him whole. He lined up his final shot. The ball sat there, white against green, waiting. His friends stood back, watching. The wind died down. Everything went still. And in that moment, Sean Connery felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, not happiness, not joy, just peace, the quiet kind. The kind that comes when you stop running, when you finally let yourself stand still. He swung, the ball flew, sailed through the air, landed soft on the green, rolled toward the hole, stopped 3 feet short. Not a perfect shot, but good enough. It was always good enough. His friends clapped, smiled. One of them said, "Not bad for an old man." Sean laughed, a real laugh, the kind that shook his whole body. And then he said something that nobody understood at the time. He said, "When I'm here, I'm not dying. I'm just playing." His friends nodded, thought it was just Sean being poetic, being dramatic. But it wasn't. It was the truth, the realest thing he'd ever said. Because on that course, for those few hours, he wasn't a dying old man with dementia and a failing heart. He was just Tommy, the kid from Edinburgh, the one who dreamed of being more than a milkman's son. And for a moment, he was. They finished the round, walked back to the clubhouse, shook hands, promised to do it again next week. But as Sean got into his car and drove away, one of his friends turned to another and said, "That felt like goodbye." And it was. 24 hours later, on October 31st, 2020, Sean Connery died in his sleep. Peacefully, they said, surrounded by family. His heart just stopped, gave out, like it had been holding on for one last game, and finally decided it was time to rest. But here's what nobody talks about. Here's the part that breaks you if you think about it too long. When they cleaned out his car, his golf clubs were still in the trunk, right where he'd left them. The grips still warm from his hands, the bag still zipped, like he'd been planning to play again, like he thought there'd be more time, more rounds, more escapes. But there wasn't. His wife, Micheline, found the clubs a week later. She opened the trunk, saw them sitting there, and broke down. Because she understood what they meant. They weren't just clubs. They were hope. They were denial. They were Sean's way of pretending he wasn't dying. And now they were just abandoned, left behind, forgotten. She took them out of the car, held them, and decided not to sell them, not to donate them. She kept them. in the garage, next to his other things, because throwing them away felt like erasing him, like admitting he was really gone. And she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But what Sean's friends remember most isn't the clubs. It's not the last shot or the final round. It's what he said on the 18th hole. "When I'm here, I'm not dying. I'm just playing." Because that's all Sean Connery ever wanted, to play, to be free, to forget, just for a moment, that the world was watching, that time was running out, that death was coming. Golf gave him that. For 60 years, it gave him that. A place to hide, a place to breathe, a place to be nobody. And on October 30th, 2020, it gave him one last gift, one last game, one last chance to feel alive before the darkness came. They say Sean Connery died peacefully, and maybe he did. But the truth is, he'd been dying for months, slowly, quietly, one round at a time. And golf was the only thing keeping him going, the only thing reminding him that he was still here, still fighting, still swinging. His son, Jason, visited the grave a month later, brought flowers, stood there in silence, and then he did something nobody expected. He brought a golf ball, placed it on the headstone, a small white sphere, worn and scuffed like it had been hit 1,000 times. It was one of his father's, from that last game. One of his friends had saved it, given it to Jason, said, "He'd want you to have this." Jason held it, turned it over in his hands, and understood. This wasn't just a ball. It was a piece of his father, a piece of the man who couldn't say, "I love you," but could say, "I'm still playing," who couldn't open up, but could open his swing, who couldn't be vulnerable, but could be free, for a few hours, on a green, under the sun. And that's how Jason chose to remember him. Not as James Bond, not as a legend, not as the man who pushed everyone away, but as the man on the golf course, the one who smiled, who laughed, who said, "When I'm here, I'm not dying, I'm just playing." Because in the end, that's all any of us want, to play, to forget, to feel just for a moment, like time isn't running out, like death isn't waiting, like we have one more game, one more swing, one more shot. Sean Connery got his on October 30th, 2020, and the next day he was gone. But on that course, in that moment, he wasn't dying. He was just playing, and maybe that's all he ever needed. One last game, one last round, one last chance to be free. The clubs are still in the garage, covered in dust now, untouched, waiting for a player who'll never come back. But if you listen closely, on quiet mornings when the wind is right, you can almost hear it. The sound of a ball being struck, the rustle of grass, the echo of a man who refused to stop playing, even when the game was over, even when time ran out. He kept swinging, kept walking, kept believing there'd be one more hole, one more round, one more day. But there wasn't. And that's the tragedy. Not that he died, but that he died still reaching for his clubs, still believing in tomorrow, still thinking he had time. We never have as much time as we think, and Sean Connery learned that the hard way. One day too late.